In today's video, I'm going to share with you why your wounds, whether they be from childhood or as an adult, a toxic relationship, whatever it may be, why they are not your fault and who and what is truly responsible for your suffering. Now, as I go through this, I want you to pull up the image of the old movie Good Will Hunting. Most of you would remember it with Robin Williams and Matt Damon. You know, he's very troubled, and it took a long time for him to trust Robin Williams as his therapist. And eventually that trust was established, and Robin Williams, as Matt Damon confessed what he had experienced as a child, implored him over and over, it's not your fault. And that's what I want you to bring up within yourself, is that same conviction, that same permission and acceptance that your life struggles and the suffering you've experienced, you're not to blame for. It's not your fault. And I'm going to give you several reasons why that is and what creates the suffering and the wounds that we all go through. So first of all, it is not your fault that society and culture is based on severe denial and self-deception. Let me go through just some of the ways. Like, I could probably talk about this for 48 hours straight of all the ways society and culture has been designed in a way to work against us and create the suffering that we experienced. One of the ways is, for centuries, we've been sent the message by culture and society that emotions are bad. It's not your fault that we've had it wrong, that experiencing emotions, sharing our emotions, dealing with emotions are bad. It's always been pushed that you need to think. Well, every thought starts with an emotion. Emotions are the single greatest things in our life. They're what motivate all of life. They're everything we seek out. I mean, think of it, whether it's a relationship, a career, a hobby, anything you enjoy, think of enjoy. That's not a thought. That's an emotion. And so there's this duality of, wait a minute, we're all supposed to seek pleasure, but it's not okay to be emotional. It's not okay to have emotions. So it's not your fault that you have all of these emotions and have never been given the skills and tools or the permission to experience all of them. Society says we can only live here in these certain emotions that are societally acceptable. We're not allowed to express all of them. So it's not your fault that society and culture has taught us that emotions are bad. It's also not your fault that there is a severe myth that society and culture passes along of what normal is. Normal gives this impression that there's a place we can arrive at where none of us really, most of us, or those that are normal, don't have imperfections. That what we're all trying to avoid is, I don't want to be bad. I don't want to have anything wrong with me. Well, that myth is, we all are perfectly imperfect. We all are human. Therefore, we all have dysfunctions. There's that word. Bam. Talk about confronting in culture. We're not allowed. That means I'm not normal. The truth is, that is normal for all of us to be dysfunctional, because we don't teach any of this stuff. We haven't learned about it. It's not okay to talk about. And so it's not your fault that if you don't fit in this place of normal, which means you can't have any negative things or any negative words or negative emotions or negative outcomes associated with your life story, you're somehow bad and defective. The truth is, we're all here. Normal is what we all try to avoid admitting to ourselves. The normal is, we are all hurt. We all have wounds. We are all dysfunctional. And dysfunctional means that the way we function, there are perfect imperfections in it. That's the truth of dysfunction. The myth of normal is dysfunction is bad. No, that is normal. That's humanity. That's grace and forgiveness. That who cares that I have dysfunctions? Who cares that I'm human? So it's not your fault that society sets up this stratus and status that if you are perfectly imperfect, which equates to dysfunction, you are not normal. The truth is, normal is dysfunction. It's perfectly imperfect. It's also not your fault that parents in our society and culture are not given permission to make mistakes or to be perfectly imperfect. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, look at the message we're sent. God the Father. God is perfect. The Father, therefore, is perfect. We can't challenge the Father. Now, I'm not talking about spirituality. I'm not confronting religion. That's not what this is about. There's a deeper metaphor to that message. My Father is always perfect and therefore never makes mistakes. And what that means is if I have any upset about my father, which really means mother too, because Mother Mary was perfect also, right? So if I have any problems with them, if there's anything they did that's less than perfect, we can't discuss it. Well, do you see the burden that places on the father or the mother? There's no truth in that because they are also dysfunctional and perfectly imperfect, which means, see, I'm going to say that word a lot because it's going to make you uncomfortable. Because the myth of normal says, no, normal means I'm not dysfunctional. The truth is, dysfunction means perfectly imperfect, means human. And so we need to break, to heal these wounds and to stop the suffering, we need to get into truth. That perfect imperfections are dysfunctions. That's normal. That's healthy. That's called being human. That's called being on the journey of life. But we have this society and culture, which you're not to blame for, has sent you the message that's bad. And so that also means that parents, we overprotect them by those messages of honor your mother and father. Well, honor, to truly honor somebody, is to speak truth, is to give them responsibility for their choices, thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so when we whitewash and ignore the truth that our parents were dysfunctional, which means perfectly imperfect, which means they're human, and they are normal, not bad, we are robbing them of the opportunity for grace. Do you see that? We're also robbing them the opportunity of true love and forgiveness because what creates a normal, which means dysfunctional, parent? The parenting they received. And so there's a child inside of them that the culture sent this message to. It's not okay. Your thoughts and feelings about your upbringing and your parents' dysfunction, which means they're human and perfectly imperfect, you can't talk about. You can't ever mention because the father and the mother and father need to be honored in this deceptive way that they are perfect and they are godlike. And so what that does is for each parent out there, even if you're a parent, it's sending the message to you that the child inside of you who experienced dysfunctional parenting, which means perfectly imperfect and normal parenting, you can't have a discussion about that. You can't be honest. There's no truth available. If there's no truth available, if we can't sit and openly talk about normal parenting, which means we were all experienced dysfunction, perfect imperfections, and we all left childhood with wounds. If we can't talk truthfully and openly about that, love isn't present. Love requires truth, both the good and the bad. And so when we whitewash it, when we cover over it, with this false self-deception and denial of truth, we are advocating as a society that it is not okay to love the child inside of us, the child inside of our parent, and how all of us are normal, which means dysfunctional. That the inability to have the discussion, to discuss that truth that is within all of us, you're not to blame for. It's not your fault. And that's why you're stuck with wounds, is because you have to live up to that wall. You have to hide in self-deception along with culture to fit in. It's not your fault that society and culture have been set up that way. All right? Also, the other thing to recognize that it's not your fault about how society and culture gets set up is society and culture is run by the most, what we term as the most normal and successful people. We all look at politicians, business owners, athletes, actors, all of these people as the ones who are normal and the ones who have figured it out and succeeded in life. We hold them up, right? Well, the highest level of narcissism and sociopathy is in the most successful. Think of it. Who sets our policies? How was Hitler created? What about the Marxist societies? All of these dictators, these are the most successful. What about businesses? How did Bernie Madoff's? All of these people, this is what we hold up as society. It's not your fault that society says this is normal. That's severe dysfunction. And the so-called most successful set up all the rules for society. Cultural rules, emotional rules, business rules, societal rules, everything. It's not your fault that the most normal, which is dysfunctional, are at the top of society. And they have determined these are all the rules that we have to live by. It's not your fault that society is run by the most normal, meaning the most dysfunctional and perfectly imperfect human beings on the planet. You're not to blame for that, all right? Now let's move on to the next area that you're not to blame for. Media and social media. I'm going to use an example here. And this, what I ask is, pause. Don't pull back into your defensive posture to prove that you're right. All right? I'm going to use a political example, and this is very polarizing. Don't go there because of which side of the fence you fall on politically, because this isn't what the topic is about. It's about it's to show how normal dysfunction isn't your fault and creates the problems and the self-deception and denial that culture creates and the part media plays in that. Let's look at the situation with Donald Trump. Whether you support him or not isn't what this is about, okay? How did Donald Trump get elected? It wasn't because of Fox News. It was because of ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, and all the social media platforms. Donald Trump would have never been elected if he was only shown on Fox News, which is basically the only Republican network in America. All other networks are left-wing and liberal. Well, they showed him wall-to-wall, nonstop, all day, every day. They didn't do that for any other candidate. The only way that Donald Trump got enough support was by showing him that he was able to convince other liberal Democrats and independents to vote for him. Now, the whole left side blames Donald Trump for the destruction of society, yet the self-deception and denial on the left is that they created their own monster, and then they blame the monster for what they created within themselves. They created all of the unrest. Why? For money and profit. And what did they say about Republicans? It's all about money and profit. Now, I can hear the Democrats are really upset with me right now, and Republicans are probably upset with me because I'm making, they like Donald Trump. And again, it's not about Republican and Democrat, because let's face it, how did all of this start? Well, the Republicans started this cancel culture and all of this stuff with Bill Clinton. All right, so all of this vitriol and everything, both sides have played an equal part, because the Republicans are going, I can't believe what the left has done to Donald Trump, and why did they do this? Well, the left is just doing what the Republicans did to Bill Clinton. You know, yes, Clinton lied, Trump lied, they both did, but most people don't want to prosecute somebody because they lied about cheating on their wife. They don't care about that, all right? So the point is this. Both sides are in self-deception. Both sides are in denial. Both sides created the problems that they blame the other side for. It's not your fault. That, along with culture, media, and social media, have created this dysfunction, normal dysfunction in society. Because do you recognize that the reason all the social media companies, which are all liberal owned, all the TV stations or TV networks besides Fox are all liberal owned. They pumped and promoted Donald Trump for their own benefit. Because if you've seen the documentary, oh gosh, what's it called? The Myth of Normal, or no, not The Myth of Normal, Social Media Dilemma, something like that. I think that's what it's called. Social Dilemma is what it's called. All of the algorithms on social media are geared towards sensationalism and division. So all the people that hate Donald Trump created him because of the way they've set up their algorithms and the way the TV stations get their ad revenue and everything. They are responsible for the unrest that eventually, that they say they hate. They created that. Now, again, Republicans started the cancel culture with what they did to Clinton. And this is my point. The inability to see that normal is dysfunctional. Do you see how both sides are perfectly imperfect and human and dysfunctional and caught in self-deception and caught in denial, and they don't see it. They only see the other side. It's not your fault that we don't confront these things from a place of truth and responsibility, that both sides, that in every situation, all of us play a part in the normal dysfunction of society. We are all perfectly imperfect. And instead of getting defensive and taking the righteous position that my side is right and I'm better than you so I can elevate myself, is to go, wait a minute, we're all normal and dysfunctional. We all struggle with self-deception. We all struggle with denial. We all gain so much benefit from making them the problem when in fact we both play a part in the problem. That's love, connection. That's resurrection. That's reconnection. That's love. It's not your fault that social media, the media, and culture don't teach you that. Also, it's not your fault that the science and medical community won't tell you the truth, that emotions run everything, that your health, that study after study after study links almost every single health condition to what you experienced in childhood. The Adverse Childhood Experience Study, like I could go on and on. It's all there. It's not your fault that every single medical school in the United States is funded by the drug companies. It's not your fault that there's only a couple of medical schools in the country where any doctor takes a single class on emotional trauma and how it affects health. It's not your fault that science and the medical community refuses to accept the truth that's already out there, that the single greatest determiner of our health is our emotional condition. It's not your fault that the medical community and our doctors are not trained when you walk in for an appointment, that the most important question they should ask you is, what's going on in your life emotionally. What's gone on in your life previously, childhood, relationships, that had they asked you those questions, you would get much better medical care and get to the solution of your illness and disease. It's not your fault that they refuse to look at our childhood and our emotional life. It's not your fault that they don't recognize, as Lisa Feldman Barrett points out, how emotions are made. That it all starts with the state of our body. That we develop, like your reactions to everything I'm saying here, are developed by your childhood experiences and the cultural definitions, as I've been through media and society and culture. All of those messages get imparted to you. And so your response to everything I'm saying has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with what I'm saying. Your feelings about all of this have to do with your childhood. You are basically 0 to 6 years old right now, especially if you're having a negative reaction to anything I'm saying. It's not at me. It's not about what I'm saying. It's about the emotions and the definitions that you were taught to have through society and culture as a child. And that is, I've pointed out, they're all based on self-deception and denial. And a lack of personal responsibility and the avoidance of truth. Remember, the lie is normal is here, when in fact, normal is perfectly imperfect, perfectly dysfunctional, and that we're all human. And so whatever negative reaction you're having, it's about that shame that culture has placed that if I don't fit here, I'm bad and defective. And so the way you're hearing me in any anger or disagreement or whatever isn't about me. It's not about what I'm saying. It's about the culture that has placed this self-deception and denial into you. It's not your fault that science and medical community and your doctors don't teach you that. You're not to blame for that. So what are the solutions? Well, the first thing to recognize is you are not to blame. It is not your fault. And it is also your responsibility. Society and culture is made up of individuals. Each individual plays their unique part in creating the society and culture. It's another myth and another problem is that society and culture is outside of us. No, it's each individual. And so what that means is if our society and culture is caught up in all of this self-deception and denial, that our media and social media and medical community and scientific community are all developed this way, the only person I can control is myself, nobody else. It makes no sense to go protest and yell and scream and tell them they have to be different. The key is make myself different. It's an individual's responsibility and truth. It's an individual's responsibility to face all of these cultural denial and self-deception techniques. Take responsibility for how they do that in their own life and live in truth. If each individual does that, that's how society and culture changes. That's how the medical community. The problem is society and culture says, go protest, but don't do the work on yourself. Get them to change, right? I'm going to tell them they need to be different. You can't fix that. Culture and society, truth and responsibility only are created within the individual. And so the thing to recognize is if you want this different, if you want to stop feeling at fault for your wounds, if you want to stop the suffering within yourself and within others, you have to make yourself responsible for doing the work to heal it. The first step in that is a commitment to a severe, unending, relentless, and complete personal grace and self-forgiveness. That we all are normal and dysfunctional and constantly struggle with self-deception and denial. It is a complete acceptance that all of us are human, that normal is to be dysfunctional, is to have limitations, is to struggle all day, every day with self-deception and denial. That normal is being perfectly imperfect. That's number one. Number two, it's making a commitment to change the way we hear the words dysfunction, trauma, imperfections. All of the so-called normal put down here as bad, and we don't want to hear that. And therefore we blame, like, and the other thing that's probably happening in a lot of people is they hear me blaming Republicans. They hear me blaming Democrats. They hear me blaming the medical community. All of it's blame. It's not blame. It's responsibility for the part we play. But because of society and culture and this dividing line, we see truth, that dysfunction, that limitations, that trauma, that parents were imperfect. We see all of that as negative. It's just truth. And so we need to make peace within ourselves that these aren't bad terms. They don't diminish us. They actually lift us. Because when we get out of self-deception, we get into truth, we are empowered. Because what happens from truth? Love. Now I can love you, right? If you're a Republican or a Democrat, and I can accept that you are sometimes in self-deception and denial, and that you're dysfunctional, just like me, now we're the same. Now we can actually have a discussion. That needs to be the shift, and the only person who can create that shift is you. Each of us as individuals are responsible for how we categorize all of those terms. And if you are stuck categorizing them as somehow less than, of somehow demeaning, of somehow not inviting, that's your journey to change that within you, to get into acceptance of truth that just means you're human. That's all. You're normal. You're just like all of us. And that takes you out of the self-deception loop, out of the problems in society and culture, medical community, social media, all of it. All right? So the key is to stop blaming ourselves. Stop shaming ourselves. Stop feeling less than. Stop feeling bad or defective. It's a pure, unadulterated, complete acceptance that we are human, which means we are dysfunctional, which means we are perfectly imperfect, and we're all okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not actually dysfunction. It's normal. It's humanity. It's perfectly imperfect. All right? Now finally, to achieve all of that, remember what I said. You are not to blame, and you are responsible. To achieve all of this requires every single individual to go become an expert. Videos are not enough. Watching things like myself or others, that's not enough. That's the thing that breaks my heart about, people watch me. But all they do is watch me. They don't do the work. And that's the downside to social media is it's just become this video culture, and videos have to get shorter and shorter and shorter because people can't sustain enough interest, enough connection with themselves to actually sit and contemplate all of these things. To spend hours, like I spend hours just going for walks, totally gutting myself. I'm in a process right now of recognizing something in myself that's really hard to face. And so I've cleared my schedule and I just sit and I meditate on it and I deconstruct it. I'm gutting myself, like literally gutting myself, recognizing a perfect imperfection and a severe dysfunction in me. like severe. And I'm gutting it. I'm doing the work. And that's what it requires. I'm not saying you have to hire me, read my books, take my classes. You can if you want. Take everybody's. My personal favorites, I love Byron Katie. I think her work, you want to see how the culture and everyone's in denial and self-deception, go do Byron Katie stuff. And you'll see real quick, the problem is never them, it's always us. You'll see the truth. I'd highly recommend you take all of her classes, do all of her work. Gabor Mate is another one. There's so many great teachers out there that I lean on, that I still learn from. And my own stuff. I use my own stuff on myself. The point is this. We will not shift culture. We will not stop suffering unless each individual takes personal responsibility to live in truth. That normal is dysfunctional. That it's okay to talk about trauma. That it's okay to admit every single parent has left a wound in us. That needs to be open in the culture and society, to be able to sit at the dining room table as adults and laugh and joke about how mom and dad were perfectly imperfect, and for parents to go, oh God, I remember, oh, that was so awful. God, how did you kids survive that? What did you do? Oh my God, thanks for telling me that. Oh, thanks for listening, Dad. Yeah, I love you too. That's reclamation. And see, that's what people don't recognize is when they cast onto me that I'm blaming parents or blaming the person who picked the narcissist. Truth sets us up when we can see that we're responsible for every aspect in our life. And then we can have those discussions. And that's where reclamation comes in. And all of a sudden, look, we're about to hit the holidays. 70% of people absolutely hate the holidays. Why? Because they're going to go back and spend time with their family. Why? Because there's so much dysfunction in the parent-child relationship. It's the worst time of the year for everybody, and no one talks about it. And they sit around holiday tables hating their mom and dad and parents hating kids, whatever it may be. That's normal. Dysfunction is normal. We need to talk about it. We need to get into truth about that as a society and culture, that's just the way it is. It can only improve if each of us as an individual gets into severe truth that that's true and takes responsibility to go become an expert, heal ourselves first and foremost. We cannot heal anybody else. Nobody has that power. Each of us is responsible to quit pointing the finger at them and asking them to change, whether that's politically, socially, relationally, anything. Stop telling them what to do. Live it within you. That's how this changes. Each of us is responsible for making that choice. Unfortunately, society and culture, the normal choice is that very few of us will ever do that. That's normal. Think of how dysfunctional that is. Think of that. There's a study that shows that only 1 out of 7 people, when faced with a life-threatening condition, if given the solution to save their life, will take the solution. Dysfunction is normal, severely normal. We won't even choose to save our lives. That's how normal dysfunction is. And that's the truth and personal responsibility. I believe. You don't have to believe. But if you want your life different, if you want to stop suffering, if you want to heal the wounds and stop feeling blamed and stop feeling at fault for all the pain you've suffered, there's only one choice. Go become an expert. Do the work. Heal yourself. Invest in yourself. Follow certain teachers, take their programs, do the work to heal yourself. Don't be 1 out of the 7. Or actually, how did I say? I screwed up how I said it, but you get my point. So that's your choice. You get to stay in that dysfunction if you want. You can do that. Just recognize you are making that choice, and we all get to make that choice. All I'm advocating is that we all get responsible for the choices, just like CNN and MSNBC and all of them need to take responsibility that they created the monster that they now say they hate and want to banish. And the Republicans created the cancel culture with what they did to Clinton. Both sides need to get into truth and responsibility. And this holds true for relationships, for every aspect in our life. All of us play an equal part in these dynamics. And until we get into truth and responsibility, go become an expert to see how we played our part. Then, until we do that, we will feel at fault and we will continue to suffer. The choice is yours. My question to you is, how is it working out for you so far? If you like the way your life is, don't change it. I know for me, it didn't work. And so that's why at times in my life, I close my schedule off. I don't see clients. I do a lot less work, and that's where I'm right now. I have a severe dysfunction that I just became aware of, and I'm working my tail off to deal with it. That's my responsibility. That's the part I can play in society and culture, is to face that. I invite you to look at your life and see if that's something you want to do. Whichever you choose, I support you. You'll get there, or you'll do what's best for you. Just recognize we are responsible for whichever direction we go. Okay? So again, you're not to blame. You're not at fault. And we are all responsible.